Hey, church, I have a confession to make. Every one of you sitting up and listening. What is he going to say? About 10 years ago, I stopped calling myself a Christian. I do not use that word to describe me or my faith anymore. And the reason I did was because I started to realize, and maybe you know this too, or maybe you've done this as well, is that word means so many things to so many different people, many of which are negative, things that I don't want to be known as or to people to think I am. Like in many ways, like some people think, oh, Christian means a religious fundamentalist or religious fanatic. That's what it is. And even when you say, oh, no, I'm not religious, that's just what they think it is, and that you're fanatically committed to that, and that is a dangerous thing. Or maybe just like old-fashioned, oh, yeah, I think my grandparents were Christians, or they went to church. Like it's something of the past. Sometimes I get this reaction even when you say to someone, oh, you're a pastor. It's like, oh, that's nice. And that's cute for you. Like I just told them I use a rotary phone still at home. Some of you are like, what's that? Right? Like that's just yesteryear. Maybe even more complex and possibly even dangerous. People think Christian means Republican. Certainly if you live in the U.S., that's what many people think or many people would say about themselves. Or possibly it means like something even worse, like a crusader, like an 11th century religious warrior going out in different parts of the world, killing people in the name of Jesus. Or perhaps Christian means racist for many people, of what they thought as they grew up or what they see in the world or the interactions they have or just stuff that they read on the news, real or perceived, whatever it is. These are the associations people make. Or in our country, residential school supporter or the inventors of the residential schools, Christians. Like this is what that word means. And whether or not it's true, whether or not it's reality in your own life, for many people, that's what it means. So I just don't use that word anymore. I also realized, maybe a little more subtle, but I think equally dangerous, is that Christian, or to be a Christian, or to say I'm a Christian, is in a sense a label that describes a static or unchanging identity as opposed to a way of life. It's just a static description of what I am or my identity. It in no way implies or means a way of life. And we can actually add layers to that I come from a Christian family, or I go to a Christian school, or I have Christian friends, all of which kind of reinforces the static, unchanging status of being a Christian. And maybe the worst part of that is that you would have perhaps thousands and thousands of people in the world who would use that label to describe themselves, or if you ask them about their religious affiliation, if they were filling out a survey about faith, they would check the box that says Christian, but practically in everyday life, their decisions and their lives look no different than someone who would never identify themselves as Christian. Which actually in many ways reveals the fact that the church is complicit in that. It's almost the way we expect it to be. John Ortberg, author and pastor, in his book, The Life You've Always Wanted, says, why is it that crotchety old Joe, who's been going to church for 25, 30, 40 years, who's listened to how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sermons and goes to Bible study, is still crotchety old Joe 20, 30, 40 years later? And the fact is, he said, the worst part about it is not Joe, but that everyone else just expects that's what he'll always be. Nobody ever expects, even though he might call himself a Christian, that he might actually be somebody that would change, that we would be someone who is kind and generous, and that we would love to be around Joe. He said, no, the norm, the expectation is that people will just be that way. I don't know if that makes you uncomfortable in any way. It does for me, for sure. But I have really good news for you. Jesus never asked anyone to be a Christian. The word Christian actually only occurs 3 times in the New Testament, never out of the mouth of Jesus. 2 of the times it was describing a term that people around Christians used as kind of a slur, a derogatory name. And so Jesus himself never actually invited someone to be a Christian. And if I can say it this way, it's not the goal of our faith to actually be Christian. And in many ways, that is a unhelpful way of thinking about it because of, not just because of what people think about that word, but that it implies, like I said, a static, unchanging label of identity instead of a way of life. No, the good news is we don't have to be Christian. In fact, don't be Christian. Jesus invites you to something much better. And that's the series we are jumping into today, that we're going to take actually the next 4 weeks to peel the layers on, to understand, well, what is it then that actually Jesus invites us into? And I'm hopefully going to do that, not using sort of overly religious language or sophisticated language, so that you can actually have a greater understanding of what is the life that Christ invites me into. What is that invitation to me? If you're someone who has said yes to Jesus, if you're someone who would say, yes, I call myself a Christian, what is a better, fuller picture of what that means? That if you're someone who's exploring what that is, or perhaps you've stayed away from faith or stayed away from church for years or forever, maybe this first time here or first time in a long time because of what that name means, and you would never tell anyone that you were at a Christian church on the weekend, that you can actually begin to grow, oh, what might that be? And actually, if I can say this, it is a beautiful and compelling, it is a much better thing that Jesus invites us to instead of simply being a Christian. I'm hoping actually to make a connection between the language that we use as our vision here at the Well, deep faith, wide embrace. Well, what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? And my prayer and hope is that you would not only have a better understanding of that for yourself, to know and hear that invitation that Jesus actually makes to you and to be able to say yes to that, but that you would actually have language, everyday language, to be able to go and explain it to someone who does not know Jesus at all, who maybe has a lot of those preconceived notions and ideas about what being a Christian is, in very different and more beautiful and an invitational words. So that's our hope over these next few weeks. So you might ask the question, well, if Jesus didn't invite anyone to be a Christian, what did he invite them and us into? And to do that, I actually want to begin with just a snippet from one of the longest recorded conversations we have between Jesus and his closest friends, just a couple of days before he died. And I'm actually going to read it for you, and it's going to give us a little bit of a picture of like, okay, well, what is, it's really actually where I want to start these whole 4 weeks. Can't start anywhere else but this, if I could say it that way. This was the passage that first jumped into my mind when I was like, where do we begin this whole conversation of what is this life that Jesus invites us into? And I'm actually going to read it from the Message translation. The Message translation is a translation of the scriptures. All the English translations we have are translations from original Hebrew and Greek documents. But the Message translation, translated by Eugene Peterson, was a translation done in using as much everyday language and everyday metaphors and ideas as possible to try to capture the things that the various writers in the scriptures were actually saying. Peterson himself was an author and a pastor, an expert in linguistics, knew and could read the scriptures out of Hebrew and Greek. And so this is a very powerful, very compelling translation. And there's a specific reason I'm using that today for this particular passage, and you will see why I think at times not only it helps us understand the heart of the text, at times it nails it between the eyes, and today is one of those passages. And so here's what I'm reading from John chapter 15, verses 4 to 10. And this is Jesus talking to some of his closest friends. Live in me. Make your home in me, just as I do in you. In the same way that a branch cannot bear grapes by itself, but only by being joined to the vine, you can't bear fruit unless you are joined with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing. Anyone who separates from me is dead wood, gathered up and thrown on the bonfire. But if you make yourselves at home with me, and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who he is, when you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples. I've loved you the way my Father has loved me. Make yourselves at home in my love. If you keep my commands, you'll remain intimately at home in my love. That's what I've done, kept my Father's commands, and made myself at home in his love. Jesus didn't invite anyone to be a Christian. Instead, he invited them to something much better, to be close to him. The much better that Jesus says here is to be close with him, to be close to Jesus. And he begins to describe what he means by using a few metaphors. First, he uses this metaphor of vine and branches, or like a grapevine, which perhaps they had just seen as they had walked to this place that they were now having dinner, or certainly in an agrarian society in certain parts of where they were in Palestine, they would have seen vineyards all over the place. And he says, look how connected the vine is to the branches. How is it connected? Like completely, like Peterson here uses the language of intimate or seamless, right? You see a seamless flow of connection between the vine and the branch into the grapes, an organic connection. If we can say this, a life-giving connection, that the vitality and everything that the grapes need to grow comes from the vine into the branches in a very seamless way. And Jesus is saying, I want you to stay close to me like that. Which is interesting. They might have thought, But then he kind of pushes it further and goes beyond sort of agrarian kind of grapevine analogy and says, make yourself at home with me. And this is the translation of the words that Peterson chooses to use to make ourselves at home. Some of your translations say remain, where Jesus says, remain in me. But if you look at the Greek word that we translate remain, or that Peterson here has translated at home, you'll see, and the way they look at what words mean, they'll look not only in New Testament Greek documents, but Greek literature, what the philosophers and playwrights were using around the Greco-Roman first century world. And there's several meanings of this word remain, and they all have to do with kind of relationship. One of them is like this idea of you would use this word when you're lingering in a certain place, when you're inviting someone to remain, or in fact, in some cases, to stay in a house is you would use this word, or in fact, to stay overnight. Like imagine you were passing through town on your way to a road trip and you stopped in at a friend's house for dinner and it got late and you were having a great time and sharing memories and great food, and they said, oh, just stay the night. They would use the Greek word remain, stay here, don't leave, linger, remain in that place, remain in this house. So the words at home is actually the most powerful way we could say this invitation for Jesus is saying when he says remain. In fact, when you look at the Hebrew word in the Old Testament that is connected to this, one commentator said it's the word that's most often used to describe how God is. Unlike human beings and human situations which come and go and are at times very unpredictable and flighty and changing, God is the one who never changes. He always remains. He's always there. He never leaves. He's always present. And so this is the language that Jesus uses. Goes beyond just kind of grapes and vines and all of that to say, no, make yourself at home, linger, remain, stay in my love, in this relation. And he says, and we know it's about love. He says, make yourselves, verse 9, make yourselves at home in my love. Now, I don't know what the original friends of Jesus who heard this were thinking as they're making sense of how he's explaining their life with him. But it actually points out or should help us not miss this very profound truth about not just this passage actually, but all of Scripture, that the biblical writers, many different biblical writers, in the Old Testament, New Testament, obviously Jesus himself right here, the metaphors, the dominant metaphors they use to describe our life with God and God's life with us are metaphors of love relationships. 3 in particular. The first one is friendship. In fact, in this same conversation, Jesus goes on to say to his followers, you are my friends, which of course they were. They had spent 3 years together, eating, talking, like staying in the same places, traveling together, praying together, depending on each other, going through hard things together, facing crisis, having difficult conversations, having arguments. They had been friends. A friend is a relationship of love. The deeper the friendship, the deeper the love. But not only friends, family, right? As I've said to you many times, if you look at the Old Testament, there are many different names for God. But Jesus, who was a Jew, who would have been very familiar with the Old Testament, the name he used of God more than any was Father. He called God my Father, to the point that the religious leaders were like, wait, what are you saying your relationship with God is like? Or he would say to people, your Father. Or when he taught them to pray, he would say, our Father. That he would describe, and the New Testament writers go on to pick this up to say, yeah, we together as followers of Jesus are children of God. And that we are brothers and sisters with each other in a household. Family is a metaphor of a relationship of love. Not just friendship, not just family, but marriage. Do you know that the church collectively, the group of Jesus followers, are collectively described as the bride? And that heaven, people say, oh, what's heaven going to be like? Like streets of gold and golf or whatever. Heaven, if you want a very succinct description, it is the never-ending wedding reception. Right? Yes, like a great wedding reception, right? It just gets better as the night goes on. The DJ's playing all the songs you love. At a certain point, you're going to make yourself at home there, right? Take your shoes off so you can really cut up that dance floor. And then, oh my gosh, it's midnight and they brought out the seafood table and the chocolate fountain. Best wedding ever, right? I should have had an Indian wedding because they go on for like 7 days, right? Like they didn't really know how to get married. But that, like a wedding reception with friends that you're there to, that you are delighting in that love and that goes on forever. Well, the scriptures say that that's heaven. That when we finally get to be united with God permanently, we, his bride, him, the bridegroom, that will be permanently in a state of love and trust and peace and enjoyment. And there will be a feast, a celebration that never ends. The point is with all of this, friends, that love is the center and the foundation of our life with God. This is the beginning point of any conversation about, well, what is the life that Jesus invites us into? It is a relationship of love. And the sad thing is, religion and love seem to be, do not coexist at all in many ways. Like people don't think of the word love when they think of the word religion. Religion doesn't seem to deal in love. Religion seems to deal in like moral conformity, and here's the rules of like institutional identity and operation, of leadership, hierarchy, right? Like that's what religion seems to be concerned with. Love is a categorically, apparently different thing. It's why if one person goes to their friend and says, hey, someone who doesn't go to church, hey, do you want to go to church with me this weekend? They'd be like, oh, yeah, God, man, I'd love to, but I got to wash my hair, or oh, football season starts, or my son's got a basketball game. Okay, so I can't. But if you said, hey, do you want to go to church with me this weekend for my wedding? They'd be like, oh, what? You're getting married? Of course. I would love to be there. Cancel my plans. Be there. Someone else can drive my kid to their basketball game. I will be there. What's the difference? Love. Right? Love is at the center of any meaningful relationship. And Jesus is making the point here and pressing it that the connection we are meant to have with him is nothing short of a deep, close relationship. And the environment is like being in a home, to make ourselves at home in love with Jesus. And it's consistent with all of the biblical metaphors of friendship and family and marriage. See, love is a way of living. It doesn't describe an identity, right? Love is demonstrated. In fact, you cannot say that you have a friendship, that you love your friends, unless you spend a lot of time together, unless you help each other move, unless you depend on each other, unless you text when you're in trouble or call, unless you've cried it out together or have great memories together and spend a lot of time together. It's an active thing to have a friendship of love. Same with a family. A family, if they're fighting, if they're distant, if they're disconnected, if they make no time for each other or serving each other, that's not love. Love is a way of being. And same with a marriage. A marriage is only good as people's willingness to invest and grow and cultivate love. And that's why, like, being a Christian can mean 1,000 things, to the point that it's meaningless to even ask ourselves, am I a Christian? But what about this? Am I close to Jesus? Man, that's a totally different question. That's a question that deals with relationship and love, right? It's like saying, oh, if someone is in a family, you don't ask them, oh, are you in a family? Because everybody has a family at some level. You're getting to know someone. What do you say? Oh, are you close? Is your family close? Are you close to your sister? Are you close to your parents, right? That's what you're asking about. What kind of relationship is this? Or in a marriage, and say, oh, is your marriage registered with the province or whatever? That's not what are you close? Is the couple close together? Friends, this makes unmistakably taking our relationship with God out of the category of religion, out of the category of a static, unchanging identifier as Christian, and saying, no, this is about a dynamic love relationship. And that's why Jesus is using these analogies of the grapevine and of being home. But if you were listening to the passage I read, you'd probably have one big fat objection coming from verse 9 and 10. When Jesus says, if you keep my commands, you'll remain at home in my love. Ooh, commands, keeping commands, obeying commands. That does not sound like love. That sounds definitely like religion, right? What is that about? That seems to be like, oh, everything that's wrong with religion. It's all about obedience, and God wants us to go to church or temple or synagogue or whatever and give this much money and make sure we do this and don't do that. And that does not sound like this whole invitation to be in a love relationship. Keep my commands? What's that about? But when I say it this way, you'll be like, oh, that's what that means. What if I describe this idea of obeying commands like this? Keeping vows. Vows. Who makes vows? I mean, it's an old word, but we still use it in one place all the time. Where do we use it? Who makes vows? Couples who are in love and who want that love to last forever. Isn't that true? That's what they do. I just did a wedding last weekend where you say vows. When people get up there, and what do? They make these massive promises to the other person. This is what I will do. I am making a promise to follow through on actions and thoughts and a way of life forever for you, no matter what, until I die. Right? And nobody who goes to a wedding stands up and says, hey, guy, girl, couple, like, you guys should just pump the brakes. That's a big deal. Like, maybe you shouldn't say something how do you know that's going to follow through? And there's a lot of people who decide they're not going to get married to because, wow, those vows feel so big. But everyone knows that that's the high point of the ceremony, when the couple faces each other, and often couples write their own vows, and they take some of the older language and they turn it into their own new way of expressing, I'm going to think this way towards you. I'm going to act this way towards you. I'm going to live this way towards you in high times and low times and good times and bad times and sickness and in health forever until I die. No one's demanding them to do that, but these are the vows, the promises, they're the commands or the demands of love that each person willingly chooses to accept and in fact express. And there is a mutuality to it, right? Like imagine you're at this wedding and the bride says, this is all the things I'm going to do and I'll love you forever and no matter what and come high and low in sickness and health until I die, I do. And then the groom says, awesome, good, yes, wow. Wow, that is awesome. I'll take that. And then she's waiting and says, well, do you have anything to say to me? And he's like, oh no, I wasn't going to make any vows to you, right? Rightfully, she'd be like, wait, what? We're both doing this. This is how this works. That's the only way love works. And what does Jesus say? As I have loved you, love me. Right? Because a vow is a choice to follow the commands of love for the rest of their lives. And it's a mutual one. And Jesus says, I have loved you. I have shown my love for you. I loved you first. I went first with the vows. And in fact, he was going to, in a few days, show them just how much he loved them. He was going to die for them. He was the one who expressed this love first. And so he invites us to follow the commands of love for the rest of our lives. Well, how do we do that? What does that even look like? Well, I was thinking, we all have rituals, right, of how we live in a home, right? When you come home and you come through the door and maybe you've been at a practice or you've been at school for a long day or a long day of work, you've been traveling or whatever, and you're home, it's like, take your coat off and you put it in that place you always put it. For some of you, it's literally right on the floor and everyone else hates it, but you're home. And you kick your shoes off, right? And maybe you go right to the fridge and open the fridge, which you only do in your own home, maybe in a couple other people's homes who you feel at home with, right? That's what we would say, right? Oh, it's like my home. And you open it up and you take your favorite snack out or whatever, and then you find that place in the home that you love to relax and you put your feet up and you, You only do that. These are rituals that we have at home, or perhaps in a place that we feel where we feel comfortable, like our home. Maybe it's a grandparent's place that's like that, or a sibling's place, or your parents' place after you've moved out, or that vacation spot that you always go back to, that hotel you always go to, or the Airbnb. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, I feel home. We only do that in places where we feel home, at home, and we only do that with people that we feel at home with. Right? Like if we didn't feel comfortable with people, weren't safe with them, whatever, we maybe wouldn't kick off our shoes, or we wouldn't just put our feet up. We wouldn't open their fridge, right? We all have rituals for how we do that. And this is what it means to actually be close to Jesus, to actually have rituals that allow us to become at home in his love. And this is what he's saying. This is what life with me is like, which sounds beautiful, but it's really hard to do. Like, how do we do that? I mean, we can picture it with like friends or family or someone we're married to, but like, what does that look like with God, in our life with God, in our life with Jesus? How do we make ourselves at home in the love of Christ? What does that even look like? Well, this is the thing, friends. This is where we start to realize that everything we do in our spirituality, in our faith, is to help us grow in our ability to receive his love and to show him love in return, to live in that love. In our church, we call these things faith catalysts, like celebrating weekly. That's what you're doing right now, meeting together for our weekly worship gather, being in home groups together, serving together side by side on teams and in our communities, engaging in personal practices of faith, like reading scripture, like praying, like giving, like silence and solitude, having a Sabbath day one day a week. The point of all of these things is not to check boxes and go, yep, that's what it means to be a Christian. It's like, no, that's how love grows. Those are the rituals of being at home with Christ, to become more and more comfortable and familiar with him and him with us, so that we know him and he knows us, so that we live in his love. One of the ways that I have found really helpful for me to learn to live in a love relationship with Jesus more. If this is the invitation he has for me, not to be a Christian, but to actually be close to him. How I grow that sense of closeness is doing just imagination prayer exercises, using my imagination, or if someone's described the eyes of my mind, to see not something imaginary, right? That's not what we mean when we engage our imaginations. But to see something that's actually very real, but we can't see with our biological eyes, we need our imaginations to see it. And it's prayer exercise. We imagine through a passage like this what Jesus is inviting us into. So I actually wanted to take, just as we get to the end of our time here together, to give a moment to actually do that. Maybe some of you are familiar with this, and it's something you do often. Maybe you're familiar with it, but you find it difficult, or maybe you've never done this before. And so we actually want to take some time to do it together. And so if you're open to do that, I just invite you to, first of all, just close your eyes. You don't have to do this. It's not going to be anything weird, just engaging your imagination. But if you'd like to, just say, what does it mean to actually live in the love of Christ, to be at home with him? Just close your eyes for a moment. And just make sure, put your feet flat on the floor, and you can put your hands in your lap. And just slow your breathing down. Just take a couple breaths in, slowly, in and out. And now I want you to picture a place that for you feels like home. Maybe it is your home, or a place in your home. Maybe it's an actual place, or maybe it's just some other picture that you're getting, like a cottage you've never been to, or a place in the mountains, or something like that. Imagine yourself kind of opening the door to that place and entering in, and you're standing there in the hallway or the threshold, and it's been a long day. And you take off your coat, you take off your shoes, and you just exhale like, I'm home. You can even imagine yourself saying that. And then you make your way over to just a spot that seems like it was made for you. Just a place where you feel completely home. Maybe it is your spot, your special place in the house or whatever. Or maybe you just realize, oh, it's that kind of a chair that I love, or whatever it is. Just picture that place and you walking over to it and just flopping down in that chair or that couch or on the floor, or maybe in the grass or wherever you are. And just feel yourself begin to calm down. Know, like, I'm home. I'm home. And now as you're there, ask yourself in your mind, where is Jesus in this room, in this place? Where do you see him? Maybe you realize you see him, he was already there before you got there. What's the look on his face? What's he doing? Remember, he's at home with you as well. And now just listen. And in fact, you can ask him under your breath, Jesus, do you have any words for me? Do you have anything you want to say to me? Just listen for any words or statements, encouragement that he has for you. And then take a moment to respond to him, again, under your breath, in some kind of a prayer or words or what you want to say back to him. Maybe you have a question for him or something you wanted to share with him or something you're just excited about or something you've wanted to say for a long time. And as you do, just imagine yourself kind of lingering in that place. You're in no rush. You're home. Friends, this is just one of the many ways that we can engage in the reality and the truth and learn to live or make ourselves at home in the love of Christ to us. And as we end here, I just thought maybe a couple of practical things for you, depending on where you're at, of realizing that it takes time to be at home, right? It actually, love takes quality time, right? Any relationship of love, any relationship of substance in your life takes time, and it takes time to learn to be at home in the love of Christ. For some of you, maybe it's just the beginning of like learning to take your coat off and stay a while, right? Like, sometimes we have our coat on in a place and we're constantly checking what time it is and constantly figuring out where the door is, and because we're not going to stay too long because we're a little nervous. And maybe you felt like that coming into church today, or maybe you felt like that even just in terms of faith, or maybe associating with a community of faith like this, and maybe just kind of been on the edge, or maybe even literally you don't even take your coat off in church and you quickly dash out or something. What would it look like for you to take your coat off and stay a while? Maybe for you that's just being at the Sunday gathering more regularly, every week. Maybe it's just staying longer when you're there, lingering after, in the presence of God, or just to talk to people, or maybe joining a home group or getting more comfortable in the group that you're in, that you'll be there more often, or you won't dash out right away when it's over. For some of you, you need to learn to linger more. I know that's the word that God's been saying to me more recently in my life with him. VJ, don't rush. Linger. Stay a bit longer when you're done praying. Just stay and wait to hear if I have more words to say to you. The passage you just read in Scripture, read it again. Read it again. Maybe there's something more. Don't rush. Linger in prayer. Or maybe, like I said, lingering in conversations with others at church, or spiritual conversations, just staying in that place a little bit longer. Again, to allow love to grow. It takes time and quality time. Maybe for some of you, just press this analogy, you need to explore the house more. Like open other rooms. Jesus has so many other things to show you. And that may look like, hey, I've never really served before in some way. I've never gotten involved in some cause of fighting injustice or helping the poor. Or I've never even talked to other people about my faith. We have the Alpha course coming up in October in each of our 3 sites, and a place to actually talk about spiritual things. Maybe you've always processed it internally, and we live in a culture that says, don't bring that stuff out in the public. Maybe you're like, I've never had anyone to talk to about this stuff before. The Alpha course would be amazing for you if you're exploring faith or just you have questions about it. Maybe serving in some way of like opening some of these other doors. Why? What's the point? To check the boxes? To say, oh, I'm a Christian, or I do this or whatever, or get God off my back? No. The point is to grow in your love relationship with Jesus, to be more at home. And so maybe there's other rooms you need to open. Maybe for some of you, if I can say this, it's time to return home. It's time to come home. Maybe you've been running a long time from the love of God. And you know it's there, and you know it's there for you, and you know actually God would not judge you and isn't there to harm you or condemn you, but it's in your mind, and you know, I need to come home. I need to return to my faith. I need to return. If this is what this is, not a religion, this is a deep love relationship with Jesus. What does it mean for me to return to him? You know, the picture I had in my mind was a cottage in Muskoka that I've been going to every year for the last 7 years. And you might say, oh, that's so nice. And it's like, no, this is a place actually where every fall I meet with 4 other guys, and we hang out together for the weekend. Well, actually from kind of Sunday to Tuesday after church services are done, I drive up there and we pray together, we laugh together, we eat good food, we watch football, we talk. And it's great, it's amazing. But I'll tell you, the first time we did it in 2017, none of us really knew each other well. Each of us knew 1 or 2 people. And someone said, let's do this together. So after King's service, I'm driving up 2 hours. I'm thinking, what's this going to be like? And I remember walking into that cottage and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go down. And in fact, one of the guys who came literally booked a flight somewhere else in the world for the Monday night so that he would have an excuse that he had to leave for on the Monday, because he was like, this could go really bad, right? None of us knew what to expect. He had a backdoor plan. We make fun of him now for it all the time. But man, now that place, and this was actually a picture God showed me the other day when I was praying about my love relationship with him. He said, Vijay, you know how you feel when you walk in that cottage? And you can hear the other guys because they're usually up before me. They're laughing and joking. You can smell the food because one of our friends is an amazing cook and he always does all the food. And you can hear them watching football and joking around together. And you know over the next 48 hours, you're going to have time to rest, to be listened to be prayed over, to reconnect with good friends, to share the burdens of our lives together. He said to me, that's my life with you. I'm the one that's there facilitating that. I can do that for you, not just once a year. And now we've upped it to twice a year, but not just twice a year, but multiple times a week if you would only linger in my love. That's the picture. The first time they kind of crossed the threshold, I'm like, I don't even know what to expect. And that may be some of you. But now I know 7 years later, that gathering, that place, that home has changed my life. And this is the invitation that Jesus says to you and me. Come, be close to me. Make your home in me. Learn to love me as I have loved you.